I said goodbye, leaving the answer. Well, it might just make me rich if I didn't spend every dollar I had trying to reach out to look this up out of this. First awake from sleep, something got in us too early. Now it's too late to repeat, but we can keep each other company. Made my bed, tied to it. You know I don't mind. Never tried to resist. Twist my knuckles back. Hold my head. Watch the golden hour fade to the red sunset. Undisciplined skin stuck on hold. Wouldn't it be good to give someone complete control? Feels so fine, formal arrangement. Life from undercover, far from indolence. Hand over hand, passing the reins. When I wouldn't give to stop worrying about my past, about the trials ahead. Left to my own devices, barely know where to begin. I could keep laying here for hours, reaching for her lips, dreaming of a world without ambition.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Welcome to our fruit beer tasting on a kind of stormy Wednesday night here. We have three fruit beers and one that very famously does claim to not contain any fruit. So without any further ado, let's start here, just so we all have some beer in our glasses. Now, we have danced around the topic of fruit beer. Like we did sours, which is playing fairly dangerously with doing a fruit beer tasting. We had a couple of dry hopped sours on that one. We did quite a few fruited beers when we did the Four Winds and Phillips tasting. That was really, really fun. But fruit beers are just an absolutely massive category, and they can be anything from kind of your traditional fruited sours like Catherina sour or Florida Weiss, right back into lambic. You have the kind of generic lumped-in American fruit beer category, which includes some delicious beers. But you have things like, Fernie's What the Huck. You could even call, some people would argue with you, but you can even call like a traditional Belgian wit with a little bit of orange peel in it. Well, if it's got orange in it, it's edging up on being a fruit beer. Now, what we're going to talk about tonight is mostly sours, because sour right now is really where all the fun and excitement is happening in the fruit beer category. I'm not going to say that there aren't some beers right now that do very, very well that aren't sours that have a lot of fruit added, like the Medicine Hat Burnside Blood Orange still does exceedingly well for us, so does What the Huck. But when people like come in and they're really geeking out about the fruit beers, it's usually something sour. But it doesn't have to be. We're going to start with the Dageraad Jumo here, which famously isn't a fruit beer. They're using that Kveik yeast, which we've talked about. Specifically, we talked about this with Jesse from 88. We talked about it quite extensively, I believe, with, I think it was actually with Dave from Establishment. We talked about Kveik a little bit too. But this is a Norwegian farmhouse yeast to review. It was literally harvested from kind of this weird broom-looking thing that they, or like a broom wreath-looking thing that they were using in this traditional Norwegian brewery. It ferments very, very warm. It ferments very quickly, and it adds this like really bright citrus orange character. So Dageraad decided to play off that orange character and say, well, okay, without adding orange to the beer, how much can we make this taste like oranges? So they added Mandarina, Bavaria, and Citra hops, all of which are really famous for tasting really, really orangey and bright. And so they created what to me is kind of like a beer mimosa without adding a single bit of orange juice or zest or skin or anything. Now, right off the hop, I do get immediate Kveikies. Sorry, I just realized I completely screwed Aaron over with his shot. But I do get immediate Kveikies. You get that right up front, really pretty, fresh orange character, and then the hops come through later. Now, I did notice that they actually claim they use both lactic acid and bacteria on this, so it's not completely clean. If you're getting a bit of sourness on this, I think you're right on. But I think that sourness really does help push that bright citrus character right up to the top. Now, this is the first time we've ever had Dageraad. There's actually 2 new breweries to our channel tonight. We have not had a Zero Issue before, I believe, and we have not had Dageraad before. Yes, it is indeed the esters, Craig. Now, Dageraad, they are out of Burnaby, BC, and they do, or at least traditionally have done, mostly Belgian beers. Now, Dageraad has an absolutely passionate, devoted, just almost cult following. And they have for a long time. And most of what they made for the first few years that they were around, they were always in the 650ml bombers. And they were always like, oh, this is our Belgian double, or this is our Belgian table beer, or this is our Saison, or this is the super weird, like, Flemish style that nobody except us has ever heard of. And the people who liked them a lot. To the point where I'd bring in like a case of 12 of the Dageraads, and the 4 or 5 people in town who are really into it, they'd snap up like the first 7 or 8, and then the last 4 or 5 would sit forever. And this is the issue I had with Dageraad for a long time, why I was hesitant to bring them in. Yes, the 4 or 5 people who really love Dageraad, they'd be right on it, like minute 1. They'd be here like waiting in line because they wanted it so badly. And then they'd never come back for it, so it'd just sit. 2 years ago, not this summer, last summer, which I guess would be a year ago, Dageraad started coming out with their tall cans, and they came out with their Rain Shine, which was a fruited Belgian pale, which I really, really liked. You know, it was kind of a bright, fresh, not quite like North American style pale ale, but a little bit steelier because of the noble hops, and then it had grapefruit and orange added, and it was just so fresh and tangy and like really, really likable. And it sold very, very well all summer, and then it got cold and the sales just stopped because nobody wanted that in winter. The Jumo is the second in that series that I've seen in the tall cans, and it's doing really well almost immediately. I got this originally in an email. Nobody actually sold me on this. It was just a random email from Dageraad saying, hey, we've got this new beer. And I almost skipped by it, but I was kind of taken by the packaging. I was particularly taken when I was just reading the label and it said, Tart Kveik fermented ale containing oranges. I said, oh, there's a bloody picture of an orange on the can. It's in an orange can. Why are you being so specific about this? And the more I dug into this, I really got interested in why they'd gone this way, what they were trying to do, and I was really, really interested in the beer and the brewing process here. So This will be, by design, warm fermented to make the Kveik work. A little bit of spices, really, really carefully selected hops, and then a little bit of lactobacillus and some lactic acid just splashed in as well, just to get this really, really bright, semi-tart style. Oh, I see Devin's watching. Devin, stop watching. It's your bloody day off. What are esters? Esters are aroma and flavor compounds. They are oil-based, and they are one of the most fundamental things that we actually perceive as aromas and flavors. So, if you've ever seen kind of the taste map of your tongue, where you taste sweet here and salty here and bitter there, esters are everything else. They are what you smell when you smell kind of fresh orange oil. They are in fresh baked bread. They're all of the more interesting, delicate things that you perceive as aromas and perceive as distinct flavors, separate from those, basic building blocks like salinity and acidity. When we're talking about, making wine, and we say, well, all wine is a balance of, alcohol and water and acid and sugar and stuff, really what we're talking about with that stuff is all of your complex flavor and aroma compounds, the vast majority of which are esters. It's not all of them, but I would say more than half of what we perceive as aromas and flavors in beer or in wine are esters. And that's kind of an interesting point, is what we perceive as orange is really just an ester. You can get it any which way. Just like, artificial maple syrup never sees a maple tree. It's made from fenugreek seeds. An artificial vanilla extract never sees a vanilla plant. You can get these flavoring compounds different ways. Now, artificial vanilla extract's a bit of a cheat. This is just clever brewing. I think that's really, really interesting. So now we're going to jump back to Alberta here, in that long. And we'll go with SYC. Now, we've done SYC, I think, just the once before, when we did our tribute to Edmonton. And we did their Fjord, and we did we do Fjord and Lunaphase? No, we did Fjord and Salud. That's the two. Because we also did the Sea Change and the Situation Brewing. But yeah, we did Fjord and Salud. And Salud was really good. That might have been where we really got into talking about Kveik, was actually when we did Salud, which was this super light, like gently hopped wheat ale, where most of the flavoring actually came from the Kveik yeast. With the Pineapple FOMO Sour, this was actually the beer that got us to start bringing in SYC. It was the one that we first started getting requests for and rumblings about is, oh, have you heard about FOMO Sour? Have you got FOMO Sour yet? What about that FOMO Sour? And we were like, what the hell is FOMO Sour? I don't know what that is. I haven't been told about this. So this was actually the beer that got us started on SYC, was people talking about this. And when I say us, Nigel found SYC for us. And that's an interesting thing there, Lorraine. Yeah, virtually no aftertaste. Part of that's the acidity. One of the wonderful things about acid, and why people, when they say, well, you know, I don't like high acid wines, it's like, well, do you like still tasting that wine 3 days from now? Because that's what's going to happen. Acidity just cleanses the palate. It cleanses the palate. It makes you kind of want another glass because your mouth's like saying, oh, my mouth's a little too acidic right now. That's not right. I need to bring something back into balance. Why don't you have a drink of something? Your body's expecting water. You're just going to put something more acidic back in there, make the acid problem worse. But in reality, like, it's what makes something refreshing is either a touch of bitterness or a little bit of sourness or a little bit of acidity. So if you have something without bitterness and without sourness, it's very rarely refreshing. In fact, it's chemically effectively impossible to be refreshing. So this is a very, very bold claim that they have on the side of the FOMO can here. When you find out there's a new pineapple flavored sour, but you can't get it as fast as your Edmonton friends because you're in Calgary, FML. Now, that's funny. That is funny. But what if this beer had flopped? How many terrible jokes will we be saying about that, that little line on the side of the can? It's like, yeah, nobody's having any trouble getting this beer. Happily, Pineapple FOMO turned out to be an absolutely massive hit for SYC. It is still our best-selling SYC beer off the shelf by a mile. But yeah, I do find that a very, very cocky thing to put on the side of a beer for a brewery that really hasn't been around very long. If I'm remembering right, these guys only got started in 2018. So, no, that's a very cocky thing. Now, pineapple is a really interesting one for me as a flavoring, because Nigel always reminds me pineapple is considered one of the actual traditional beer flaws. It's not something you're supposed to be able to taste in a beer. It's kind of like green apple skin or butterscotch. It's something that shouldn't be there. And now people are adding pineapple to beers all the time as just this like super bright, fresh, interesting fruit character. Medicine Hat Brewing has a pineapple sour. There's this pineapple sour. They're just kind of... Hell's Basement had their pineapple milkshake IPA called The Yard. It's coming along pretty aggressively. And this one to me always reminds me a little bit of like pineapple upside down cake. The pineapple character is a little bit candied. And I reached out to SYC actually this afternoon. They didn't get back to me in time. Tell me if I'm crazy, because this definitely, the Zero Issue definitely has salt added. It's a Gose. Somebody else got like a salty thing on this? Let me know.
Bye, Nigel.
And yeah, Craig, you can be cocky when it's this good. This is just candy. It's fresh pineapple. It's got this wonderful, like, grainy backbone behind it. It's almost, if you think about it, a little bit like cakey with the sweetness of the pineapple. I do get something salty in there, at least myself. And the whole thing comes off almost like, yeah, a pineapple upside down cake or like a pineapple Danish. It's just wonderful together. It's a great combination. Now I'll touch briefly on your classic kettle sour method. Kettle sours are usually brewed with lactobacillus and pediococcus. Lacto is one of those brewing ingredients that's a little more sensitive than you might think. So when you add Saccharomyces cerevisiae, especially if it's like traditional North American brewer's yeast, it's pretty happy to do what you want. You know, you can pitch it into almost any amount of sugar. You can pitch it in as long as it's not, you know, hot enough that it kills the yeast. It's pretty happy to ferment, even at a fairly warm temperature. 1056 will actually keep fermenting. It'll be stressed and it'll give you different flavors, but it'll keep fermenting down almost to the point where like you're at freezing. But lactobacillus is fussy. It likes acidity, but it can't handle a lot of hops in the beer. So if you're doing a fruited sour like the ones we have here, lacto is fine all day long. You can use lacto, but if you're trying to do like a sour IPA or a dry hopped kettle sour or something, you have to be very, very careful with lacto, and very often you'll actually have to make the base wort slightly basic just so that the acidity of the hops doesn't screw up lacto's ability to actually start fermenting. Because yeah, it's one of those things that just, it doesn't like hops. Now that goes back to the whole purpose of hops as a preservative. Like when we talk about adding hops to a beer, I mean, now we add tons of hops to a beer because IPAs are delicious and we like IPAs, but hops were always added as a preservative to inhibit bacterial growth, like lacto. So now when you're trying to brew a sour beer, the fact that hops inhibit lacto growth is actually a bad thing. So we're kind of coming full circle. Well, why can't I brew my kettle sour with 100% lacto? Because that's not how hops or bacteria work. So yeah, I'm glad other people are picking up the salt on this because it doesn't say it's a salted sour and I get tons of it, so. That said, man, that's good. I really, really like this beer. Oh, Kevin, is Craig famously salty? That does sound right. So talk a little bit about what we got coming up for beers coming down from Calgary. I will save the big announcement because it's from establishment till when we get to the establishment beer. There's nothing, unfortunately, new from 88. They're going to give me a tiny bit of beer and that's it. There is potentially something new from Annex I can't talk about yet, but they were theoretically going to have it for me last weekend and didn't, but they should have it for me this weekend, so I should have a brand new Annex beer on the shelves for Sunday. And if you haven't had Your Belgian Things yet, which is the Establishment Annex collab, it's a Belgian table beer at 5.1%, and it's absolutely spot on. If you haven't had it yet, do come get it, because that's really, really underrated, and like, that should already be sold out. I can't believe it isn't already, because it's really spectacular. from establishment I'm not going to cover yet, but Cabin has a couple of really, really cool new projects. The one I don't know too much about, the one that I'm more excited to talk about and why I actually started talking about this is they have a new beer called Black is Beautiful. And it is a collaborative project across a number of different breweries all across North America, with 100% of the proceeds going to social justice charities. So that we are getting 5 flats of. It'll be on the shelf Sunday, and that's going to be something really exceptional and different. So we don't usually see stouts kind of launch in, the middle of July, but this one's going to be really something. So I'm excited for that. Otherwise, yeah, like I got the new Dominion Days as well, so that's new. Yeah, I'm just curious what people are kind of thinking about this. Is pineapple in beer as big a controversy as pineapple in pizza? Don't spoil it, Craig. Bloody Craig. Yes, fine. Craig. God, I hate that guy. Yes, so from establishment, we are in fact getting Kaleidoscope Eyes. We're getting 6 flats of it. It is the imperial version of the Super Fusion. It is still a Catherina sour. We'll cover Catherina sours in a minute. It's up at 7.8% alcohol, and it is fruited with apricot and passion fruit. So yes, we are in fact getting that. And yeah, it sounds pretty spectacular. Haven't had it yet, obviously, but it will be out right away. It actually just hit, the reason I can talk about it actually today is today was rollout day for that beer. It made Canadian Beer News blog this morning, so I'm now officially allowed to talk about it. So if it had come out tomorrow, I couldn't have said anything at all. And yes, for those who want to call dibs on the Kaleidoscope Eyes, I go up Saturday morning. I almost certainly will not be back in time to actually have it on the shelves Saturday. So we open at noon Sunday. That is when the Kaleidoscope Eyes, the Black is Beautiful, and everything else that I pick up in Calgary, it will be on the shelves first thing Sunday morning. So, or Sunday at noon. I gotta pour these less full so I can actually get back to talking faster. I'm not going to, but I should. Let's go right on to Zero Issue. Now, Zero Issue is a brewery that I don't know all that very well. I actually got introduced to these folks when the Roundtable Board Gamery, just over there. For those of you at home, that's south from where I'm standing. When they started actually asking for it by name, they started asking for the Multiverse, the Nemesis, and the Innsmouth Sour. And this was back far enough that really sours weren't really a thing for us, and we weren't selling a ton of sours yet. So I think we sold the Blind Man Kettle Sour, and I was really edgy about bringing in a new sour, and it was one of those, well, I guess we'll see how it's done. And no, it's done very, very well since. So this Relic, I think, was actually supposed to be an exclusive for Dylan's Burger Deli, but Dylan forgot to tell me about it, and I kind of sold most of it and put it in the beer tasting before he came to get it. So, oops. This is a Gose, and Gose is really, really interesting. It comes from the Saxon part of Germany, and in theory, at one point, it wouldn't have been part of the, or wouldn't be subject to the Bavarian purity laws of 1516. But when kind of Prussia and Germany unified with Bavaria, regions like Saxony that had previously not had any actual beholdens to the 1516 purity laws, all of a sudden had to jump on board and say, oh, well, I guess we have to be part of that now. Now, Gose, let's jump back to what the 1516 purity laws were. The German liquor industry is incredibly, incredibly regulated. And I'll actually grab a bottle of wine here to demonstrate my point. I just happen to have one to hand. So when we're talking about German wine laws, it's kind of amazing. So on this wine label, it says that this is by Leitz. It is Berg, Schlossberg, Rudesheim, Grosse Gewacke, VDP Grosse Lager. So what does it tell us? Well, Leitz is the person who made it, and it says it's a Weingut. Well, Weingut means that either he owns the grapes and vineyards that he makes the wine from, or he leases them on a term of at least 5 years. So he has control over the vineyard. It says Rudesheim, and on the back, it must say by law. Yeah, it's at the very bottom of the label. It says Rheingau. So Rheingau is the village. Rudesheim is the, Rheingau is the region. Rudesheim is the village. Berg Schlossberg is an individual vineyard. It has to declare that it's Riesling, and unlike Canada, where if you put the name of the grape on it, it has to be 75%. No, it has to be 100% Riesling. It has to be Trocken. And then we also know that it is a Grosse Gewacke, which is basically the same thing as Grand Cru. So it comes from the absolute highest quality of, grapes in all of Germany. So with that, we can literally get to I can tell you everything about what that wine's going to be like without ever opening it, including within like 100 meters where the grapes are coming from. It's amazing how incredibly specific that is. And the Germans have been like that for basically all of their distilled and fermented wines, beers, and spirits forever. And the Bavarian Purity Law of 1516 was a very, very early method of this, which basically said that beer has 4 components. It has water, hops, malt, and yeast. And it said within that that malt could be kind of wheat, barley, or rye. And that was all that was permitted. So within that, and it's also known as the Reinheitsgebot, and that was fine for Bavaria, but this was from Saxony. And in this part of Saxony, where they made Gose, the big part of the brewing process involved salt, either from the naturally brackish water. When I say brackish, you might think, oh yeah, Saxony, they must be right on the ocean. No, they're dead smack landlocked middle of Germany. They are nowhere near the ocean. I have no idea why their water would be so salty. And then they also traditionally added coriander. Now this beer, as far as I know, doesn't have any coriander in it. They're adding fresh tangerine rind and fresh tangerine juice to actually get that citrus character. So when we go to those, traditional Bavarian purity laws that now apply all across Germany, beers like this, the traditional, well, not this is in Calgary, but beers like that, they would have real complaints and say, well, no, we have our own brewing traditions that aren't part of Bavaria. We weren't ever part of Bavaria. We're still not part of Bavaria. We might be part of Germany, but that's a different thing. So they actually created special exemptions. It's like, well, you have to be part of these laws unless you're from this part of Germany, in which case you can use something else like salt. So Gose is its own thing. Went completely extinct in the world starting just after the First World War. By the end of the Second World War, it was completely extinct. It was revived just before the Berlin Wall fell. It was first revived in 1986 after being dead since about the late 1930s. So it had kind of a 50-year nap, and then it came back, and all of a sudden is kind of a huge, huge deal again. Gose is very similar to kettle sour, other than the fact that it is lightly salted. Now, there are certainly kettle sours that can contain salt, but Gose is always salted. Oh wow, we got so many comments here. Yeah, I'm gonna weed out the sick archaeology burns and just kind of comment on the beer questions. I also really like the Relic. Zero Shoe, like I said, they do really nice work, and I like this combination of kind of bright citrus and then adding the salt, so it's not overly fruity, it's not overly tart. The salinity gives it just some nice balance, and I wouldn't say this is needlessly overly salty, and I probably couldn't have this with something very salty, but I like it just as it is. It adds something different that I didn't know I was ever looking for in a beer with the salt, but now that I've had it, I really like it. I think this is probably my favorite so far. So I'm just having a moment with this beer. It really is that good. I hate the word mouthfeel, but yes, it has really great mouthfeel. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we have coming up next. For those of you who don't know, we are taking a couple of weeks off from our Friday night wine tastings because Aaron wants to go canoeing. It's not the whole answer, but that's part of it. So we are not here this Friday. We are not here next Friday. We are next back on and live on Friday, July the 24th, where we will be returning to Spain. And we do tend to do quite a bit of Spanish wine, but there's a reason for that. Spanish wine is, for the dollar you pay, probably the best value in wine right now. And I wanted to get back to just having a really, really cool winemaker on, because when we come back, I want to come back strong. So Muga is, if not the most, certainly one of the top 3 most prestigious winemakers out of Rioja. And I wanted to kind of hit the fact that when we think about Rioja, at least for me, what do I think of? I immediately think, oh, well, you know, Rioja barrel-aged reds. You know, we had the Prana that was kind of more light and fresh and fruity. That was really, really neat. But still, I don't think of Rioja as making rosé or making white wine. And, you know, technically this is Cava, but, you know, this style of winemaking, just such incredibly high quality for such little dollars, and we can get the head winemaker from Muga to join us for something, that's going to be really, really fun and really exceptional. This is something I've been working on since, April, putting this one together, so it's kind of nice to see it all come together, and that is in 3 Fridays from now. So that's coming up. And then in a week, we are going to keep it super, super local. Not that we ever go too far afield, but, you know, we do still have some really interesting things coming out of southern Alberta in particular, including Old Man River Brewing out of Lundbrick. Now, this is our first ever 5 beer tasting, because Devin and I actually kicked this one around for quite a while, deciding what we were going to do for this, because now I'm going to turn this one this way. These are small cans. We thought about charging, you know, like $12 for the tasting, finding ways to like make this work, and it was sort of like, you know what? This would make it about $20. Let's just do the big bottle in there too. Now, this big bottle, unfortunately, is the Bad Santa barley wine. We are not doing a 10.5% barley wine in the heart of summer, because that's just, I would like to be functional at the end of the tasting as much as anything else, especially after 4 beers. We're going to be doing the, also in a big bottle, St. Joe's Brown, which is their, I think, best beer. Really, really pretty, big, rich, powerful brown ale, only comes in the big bottles. Otherwise, we'll do the Pill Style Lager, their very, very classic kind of West Coast Pale Ale, their Lime Sally Dry Hop Lime Ale, and finally their Citrus Blonde. We will have Brittany from Old Man River, or a reasonable facsimile thereof, as our special guest on Wednesday. So that is coming up a week from tonight on the 15th. Now, let's get to the part of the evening we've all been waiting for, the Superfusion. Because it was awesome last summer. I took this beer very much for granted. Actually, Superfusion was on the very, very first truckload we ever brought down from establishment. This is before Jamrock became like a year-round. Our very first truck we ever came down with from establishment, I want to say, had Superfusion, Afternoon Delight, and Skyrocket. I don't know. Mike can tell me if there was anything else, but I don't think there was anything else on that truck. And I think we sold all of that in like 3 days. It was an absolute runaway hit. And I went back and said, oh, well, I'll take as much Superfusion as I can get. They're like, no, you idiot. It was a one-time brew. You should have ordered more. We have Jamrock coming out in the fall. You'll probably like that. Now, of course, now Jamrock's like our best-selling beer or thereabouts. But at the time, I was just heartbroken that, oh, no, I can't get any more Superfusion. Superfusion last year was made with green guava. They had a real hard time. For those of you who keep asking why I can't get any more 2 Tickets to Paradise, it's the fruit. They really struggled getting green guava this summer, and they still haven't found a reliable enough source of mango to remake 2 Tickets. And if you ever ask them, they're even more sick of hearing about 2 Tickets to Paradise than I am. So, yes, the head brewer at establishment, I finally said, I asked him, I don't know if it's this trip or the trip before, I said, hey, you know, just so you know, I'm getting so many questions about 2 Tickets to Paradise. He just turned around in disgust and walked back to the brewery. Just didn't even answer me. So we're all tired of that. But I'm so hoping to see it again someday. Now, I love Catherina sours because they're fairly new on the brewing scene. And they're also a style of beer that isn't from Europe. It's not from North America. It's not Australian. It's a South American beer style. And at least as far as I'm aware, for like beer styles that we see here, it might be the only one that's traditionally South America. Now, Central America has, of course, like rice-based cervezas and corn-based cervezas. That's its own thing. But South America really doesn't have one other than Catherina sour. Now, Catherina is named for a district within Brazil. And unlike Berliner Weiss, unlike Gose, which are traditionally unfruited styles that have fruit added later, Catherina styles cannot be made without fruit. It's an endemic part of the actual style itself. So you can't have an unfruited or dry hopped Catherina sour. That's just a kettle sour. Otherwise, it has to be 50% barley by weight. The rest can be whatever you want to add. If you want to make it more lambic-y, you can use unmalted wheat. If you want to make it something else, you can change it up. If you want to make it very light, you could add corn or rice. Lots of things you can do. Alcohol is also a little higher than Berliner Weiss. Berliner Weiss is very rarely as strong as 5%. These are almost always 4.5 to 5%. This one is 5.5. And yeah, I read a couple of articles about Catherina sours over the last few days doing prep for this, and everything I've heard is like the defining fruit in these. They always add tropical fruit, but the defining fruit in these is usually guava. And I think that's why this is such a right down the middle classic way to do it. Now this is something I absolutely adore. We are about 70% sold through on the Superfusion. There's maybe a flat and a half. There's about a shelf left. So our shelves hold 9 4-packs, and that's about all that's left of the Superfusion. And oh my God, yes. Oh, the guava. The colors, children, the colors. Oh, I just love this beer. No, it's my beer. You can have this. Yeah, you can have all this you want. There you go. Same story with the yeast. Yes, this will traditionally be slightly acidified and then fermented with a sweet yeast and then finished with lacto. Now, this is not a traditionally very, very clean ferment. This is not something where you're adding a sanitized fruit syrup or sanitized fruit preserve to this. You're usually adding whole fruits or unboiled fruit syrup just because you want to add that really, really nice wild yeast character to this. It's a very tart, very balanced, very spicy and complex thing. And the more microorganisms you introduce into this, the more complex it's likely to be. Oh, he's fine. Poor hand, my eye. Now, I'll admit, I've had guava. I don't think I could tell you with a gun in my head exactly what guava tastes like, but the fruit character on this is just exceptional. There's so much to like here. It's so balanced, it's so well done. And one thing I will share is sometimes people come in and they look at the establishment cans and they just say, oh, no, that doesn't look like it's really going to be that good. It's like, if they don't have to put a whole bunch of money into the packaging, if they can just leave it black on white, how good must the beer be that they can get away with that? And I love that about establishment is all their packaging. Okay, thank God they've moved the name from the bottom of the can to mid up because we put them in beer flats that cover this much, so all the cans look the same for a while. Happily now, all the cans have the name up here, which is a wonderful thing they've done. But really, I like their black and white, aesthetic. And if you ever notice, the glasses that I do the beer tasting with these days are actually establishment glasses. So, and yeah, exactly. Elizabeth's absolutely right. Like, establishment is maybe not as culty as 88, because my God, those guys have just gone completely bananas. And I absolutely love Cabin, and they've been incredible friends at the store. But I gotta say, like, establishment, just every time I come back to that, every time I buy an establishment, it's like, oh yeah, I really love this. And it doesn't matter what it is. Like, I don't know if any of the other breweries we've ever worked with has ever made a beer quite like Mellow Gold that had no hops, no souring, no fruit, no fireworks. It was just kind of Bavarian purity law. It was, grain with some water and some hops and a little bit of, yeast added. It was a very, very basic, like, malt forward beer, and it absolutely killed it. It tasted so incredibly rich and cereally. And I was really hesitant to bring it in because I was like, oh, I don't know if I'd buy that. And then we tasted it. It's like, I need so much more of this. They're a brewery that, I don't know, every time I think this is going to be exceptional, they knock it even further out of the park and just blow me away. So I'm feeling Kaleidoscope Eyes isn't going to be around real long. And I agree, I absolutely love the labels. It's just, I do kind of laugh when people turn the nose up at the black on white and they go with something with, you know, no shame on Zero Issue. Their labels look great, but they are a little more eye-catching. I think the establishment tends to sell to people in the know. They don't rely on their packaging to sell beer. It's certainly eye-catching, and when I see establishment, I want it, but no, it's what's inside the cans that sells with these guys. Uh, 4213. That's fair. This is a tough one for me this week because there's really not a bad beer on the table. Ooh, where am I? I mean, 4. Jeez. Yeah, I think I'm with you, Deirdre. 4. All 4312, but 4231, 4132. Yeah, like, anybody have a ranking that doesn't have number 4 first? No, they don't. It's always nice when we have a week where everybody seems to like everything. Does anybody here have a beer they didn't like? Because I think it's always more interesting than I liked everything. 3124. Oh, wow, Courtney had it last. Oh, that's interesting. Courtney, tell me why. I'm so curious. Why didn't you like it? That's fascinating. No ranking is ever wrong. The day we do Apothic Red in a tasting is A, the day that, you know, we're going to stop doing tastings, but B is the day that your ranking's allowed to be wrong. 2431, 4132, 4213. Hey, you know what? Nothing wrong with having an opinion. Like, honestly, I will say this. Like, I think I rated this last. This was the last 4-pack I bought in the store to take home because I like it so much. The fact that I rated it last is not anything against this beer. I would say, you know, the ultimate test would be, what did I actually spend my money on? Well, none of them, because I don't pay for beer in my own store. But, you know, in theory, my theoretical money was spent on this one because I really like Pineapple FOMO. But I just really love the others just that tiny bit more. No, I mean, tough crowd. And I love being able to do things like this. I will say, when I said to Devin that I was doing this slime, he's like, really? You know, we'll sell all those out anyway. Like, you don't have to, like, work at selling. He's like, no, but I want to do these. They're going to be fun. He's like, all right, man, your money. So, and we have a great answer from Julie. Didn't like the Relic at first. Tasted really malty. Oh, okay. I'm going to come back to that then, Julie. I want to try that. Didn't like one very much. That's totally fair. And please don't apologize to me. I didn't make any of this. I did homebrew. None of my beers were this good. I will say, I'm glad this was my number 2 because it does run with the Superfusion to me. And yeah, that's fair, Jeremy. Like, I can see doing, you know, just sours and that winning. I can see doing traditional German styles and that absolutely crushing everything. I can see doing another, like, Best of Edmonton and that just rolling over everything on the table. I could see doing kind of Kveik fermented beers and this rolling over. Okay, no, I'm too much of an IPA freak. I'd pick an IPA. But this could theoretically run over other Kveik fermented beers. You know, I can really pick a lineup for any of these where they would actually be my favorite thing on the table. It's not the fault of any of the beers that they didn't finish first. It's just, what a hell of a lineup tonight. And yeah, I actually, normally I have a pretty good idea what the order is going to be. And, you know, I don't bother tasting them first to actually pick an order. Nigel and Aaron and I actually went through all of these and like shuffled the order back and forth. The Dageraad was as far up as like here and slowly slid back down to here. This started here. They've kind of all been all over the place. This was a very, very tough tasting order to pick and almost impossible just without tasting them, especially with how salty this is. I really struggled to place that. That could have been, I mean, it's very gentle. It could be here if it wasn't for the salt. With the salt, if it was even a tiny bit saltier, it'd have to be at the absolute opposite end. That's what makes. And you know what? Everybody has days where their palate is off. I'll tell a fun story. This is probably 5 years ago now. I came in and I had opened all of these whiskeys, and it was just a day like any other. I wasn't sick, wasn't hungover, wasn't particularly hungry or thirsty. I came in and my palate was nightmarishly bad. And this had to be a few years ago because my dad was still working in the store. So this is probably more like 10 years ago. And it was me and my dad and Steve Firth, and we opened the lineup, and it was later in the season. It was probably like week 10. So like there was like $1,000 worth of whiskey open, and I was convinced that something was wrong with each and every bottle. I was picking out like maple syrup and just overly sugared, and like I took the original 6 lineup. I said, nope, they're all off, not worth it. We're not representing the store that way. We need to open a whole new set of tasting bottles. And when they all tasted the exact same way, it was like, oh no, it's my palate. I just spent $1,000 on whiskey without needing to. Oops, not my proudest hour, but it happens to all of us. There are days where you wake up and your palate's just not right. You're not prepared to taste wine or whatever. Your palate's just having an off day, you know? Go get yourself a couple Big Macs, come back tomorrow. It's probably the perfect day to eat Big Macs. That would be the day to do it. But yeah, no, that it can happen to all of us. All right, any other questions, folks, before we wrap this thing up? While I pour myself a little more of, Jumo. Jumo's delicious. I'm going to take that as no more questions then. Aaron, I think we're done for this evening. I think that's about all right. So thank you, folks. We will see you in a week for our tasting of 1 week, not 2.
Oh.
1 week for Old Man River.
Oh, yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one. Thanks, Aaron.
Nice.
Glad one of us is paying attention. So yeah, we will be joined by Brittany, or a facsimile thereof, from Old Man River. We'll be tasting 5 of their beers, including a very large bottle of the brown ale, which I'm particularly looking forward to. And that will be at 6 o'clock on Wednesday, July the 15th. And until then, I've been Kyle with Andrew Hilton Wine and Spirits. Cheers. Enjoy your hopefully less rainy Wednesday evening. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
One sits to join me, and she passes me a match. She said, I could die tomorrow, and I would change a thing. So I went up tomorrow to do what one could do. Hey, hey, hey. We emptied our wallet, let the wind carry away the cards, coupons, and the things. called her babe. Told him what she